Ladies and gentlemen, the warnings Donald J. Trump has been shouting from the rooftops for years just exploded into reality. A leaked memo confirms what the media and the Democrats swore was just a conspiracy theory. Not 20, not 50, but 274 FBI agents in plain clothes, in MAGA hats, in beanies were embedded inside the January 6th crowd. And some of them, they weren't just watching. They were pushing, they were provoking, they were steering people straight into the Capitol. Think about that, guys. For years, we've been told that it was Trump, it was MAGA, it was the Proud Boys. You were demonized, you were gaslit, you were branded a threat to democracy. But now, the truth is finally crashing on the FBI like a sledgehammer. It is crazy what is coming out, guys, and it doesn't stop there. In fact, the man who spearheaded the weaponization of the federal law enforcement against Trump, former FBI Director James Comey, has just been indicted. Indicted for lying to Congress, indicted for obstructing justice, and Trump is right again. The deep state is being dragged into the light piece by piece. So, guys, today we are diving headfirst into the story that the establishment hoped that you'd never hear about. The FBI's secret army on January 6th, the collapse of their cover-up, and of course, the first domino to fall, James Comey himself. This isn't the end, folks. In fact, this is just the very beginning. Hit the like button, subscribe. We got a lot to talk about. So, for years, President Donald J. Trump stood on stage after stage, rally after rally, and he warned the American people about something dark, something dangerous that was festering inside of our government. He told us that the FBI and the Department of Justice were not acting as impartial defenders of the law. He said that they had been weaponized, twisted into these political machines designed to protect Democrats, to silence conservatives, and to pretty much crush anyone who dared to challenge the establishment. And what did the media do? Well, what did the Democrats say, right? Well, of course, they sneered, they mocked him, they laughed at you, the American voter, for even believing that that might be true. That makes no sense. Why would the FBI collude against one person, right? Yeah. Every time Trump sounded the alarm, CNN ran a panel calling it a baseless conspiracy. Forgot my air quotes. I always forget those. MSNBC told its audience Trump was paranoid. Democrats on Capitol Hill parroted the exact same line. Nothing to see here, folks. Trust the institutions. Yeah. But here's the reality. On September 28th, President Trump wasn't paranoid. He wasn't delusional. He wasn't spinning conspiracy theories. He was telling the truth. And now the dam has burst. In fact, the question we have to ask ourselves today is very simple. What if, hear me out, guys, what if Trump was right all along? Because the evidence now proves it and the establishment can't hide it anymore. Now, the smoking gun has finally surfaced. In fact, a leaked internal memo has confirmed what millions of Americans have suspected, but were told to shut up about. The FBI was not a bystander on January 6th. No, they were inside the crowd. 20 agents. Well, actually, no, not even 20 agents, not even 50 agents. Over 274 FBI operatives were embedded among the protesters that day. Now, these weren't obvious law enforcement officials. You wouldn't have known just by looking at them because there were no badges. There were no jackets saying FBI on the back. There was no tactical gear. No, they just blended in. They wore MAGA hats. They wore pulled beanies over their heads and whatnot. They carried the flags. They stood shoulder to shoulder with the real Trump supporters. They blended in, giving the impression that they were a part of the movement. Like no one would know any better. But here's where it gets even worse. Eyewitnesses are now testifying that some of these plainclothes agents weren't simply observing. They were whispering, they were encouraging, they were nudging people toward the steps of the Capitol. They were saying things like, go inside, push forward, fight for your country. Come on, guys. Ladies and gentlemen, let that sink in, okay? The FBI didn't just watch the events of January 6th unfold. They may have helped create them. And if that is true, then the story that we were told for nearly 4 years completely collapses overnight. Because if the FBI planted themselves in that crowd, I have one question for you. Who was really behind the chaos that day? The right Medicare plan balances three things: cost, doctors, and benefits. But most people are stuck sacrificing one of those. Now, this is why I partner with Chapter, because they help people find Medicare coverage where you don't have to choose. You can actually have all three. Now, one viewer, she said to me, Ron, Chapter showed me a Medicare plan that saved money and kept my doctors. So let me ask, are you going to keep sacrificing, or are you going to do what most people already are, balancing it all? Well, most people are calling the phone number right there on the bottom of your screen, or they're visiting askchapter.org/Ron. The phone number is 909-563-8279. And when you call, of course, it's a totally free call. They will never charge you anything. Let them know that Ron says hello. And so now here's where the anger really sets in, because this isn't just about the FBI being present on January 6th. It's about the years of lies that came before this memo ever saw the light of day. I want you to think back to Christopher Wray. Many of you guys remember him, the FBI director. Well, under oath, before Congress, he told lawmakers point blank, the FBI did not play a part in January 6th. He danced around questions. He used careful lawyer language. I'm a lawyer. If anybody watches TMZ, you know what I'm talking about. But his message to the American people was crystal clear. The FBI had nothing to do with it, according to him, according to Christopher Wray. Now, do you remember the Inspector General's so-called findings years ago? They admitted, oh yeah, maybe around 20 FBI employees were present, but insisted that they were not involved. They made it sound harmless. Just a few people monitoring the crowd, no role, no interference, nothing to see here, folks. Now we know the truth. Not 20, not harmless, 274. And that bombshell only surfaced after Donald J. Trump returned to the White House. Okay, ask yourself, guys, if Trump hadn't won, if Biden were still in office, do you honestly believe we would ever be hearing about this memo? Of course not. I mean, the story would have been buried. It would have been locked in a drawer somewhere, spun as a conspiracy theory, of course. So here's the situation we got to sit with here. Were we deliberately lied to before the election to protect Biden's campaign? Were the American people manipulated with a cover-up designed to destroy President Trump and his supporters? Well, the timing pretty much answers that question for you. And let's not forget the most heartbreaking part of this entire saga, the lives destroyed along the way. More than 1,500 Americans were prosecuted in connection with January 6th. Yes, some were violent, but the overwhelming majority of them were not. I mean, nearly 85% just walked inside. Many people literally ushered in by security. Some described it as if they were like following a red carpet, getting a tour of the Capitol. You know, so while talking about grandmothers, veterans, school teachers, everyday citizens who believed that they were just simply exercising their First Amendment rights, they didn't smash windows. They didn't assault officers. They wandered through the halls, many staying inside for mere minutes. Yet they were hunted down, dragged through the court system, and painted as dangerous criminals. Tucker Carlson was one of the first mainstream voices to show America what really happened. Drop a Tucker Carlson in the comments if you really appreciate what he did by initially uncovering a lot of what they try to keep in the darkness, guys, releasing security footage of peaceful individuals being calmly escorted through the building. I swear it seemed like a museum tour. Like there was no rage or craziness going on. And for that, he was vilified. They tried to silence him. They tried to silence pretty much anyone who asked. If more people were peaceful, why treat them like terrorists? But now, of course, with the revelation that FBI agents may have been whispering, pushing, and even urging protesters toward the Capitol, a very chilling question emerges now. Did the government help create the very crimes it later prosecuted? Families have been bankrupted, careers devastated, destroyed, reputation shattered, and now we're discovering that the FBI's fingerprints may have been on the scene the entire time. Ladies and gentlemen, if that doesn't make your blood boil, then I don't know what will. Now, I want to talk about how January 6th was used. It was weaponized to reshape the entire political landscape. Now, from the moment that the smoke cleared at the Capitol, Democrats and the media, they didn't hesitate. They seized on that day and they declared it proof that Trump supporters are, in fact, dangerous, unhinged, and a threat to democracy itself. Well, Joe Biden, he stood in front of the cameras, wagging his little finger at half the country, claiming MAGA was the biggest domestic threat America faces. Now, think about that, guys. Not China, not fentanyl pouring across the border, not terrorists plotting abroad. Biden said you were the threat simply because you supported Trump. That was so ignorant, but it happened. And they milked this narrative for like every ounce of political capital that they could squeeze out of it. It was their justification of censorship online. It was their justification for FBI surveillance of conservative groups. It was the drumbeat for their fundraising emails, their campaign speeches, and their entire midterm strategy. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let me go ahead and start with this. America is at a turning point. I mean, we've got President Donald J. Trump back in the White House, fighting for our country's future, restoring strength and demanding accountability. But while the political battle battle rages on, there's another fight, just as fierce. In fact, it's the battle against cancer. And today, I want to tell you about a company that is making headlines for a breakthrough that could literally change everything. In fact, today's video is sponsored on behalf of Oncolytics Biotech, traded on the NASDAQ under ticker symbol ONCY. Now, if you've been following me for a while, you already know that I don't just throw out random companies. What I'm about to show you is serious because it's about saving lives and potentially reshaping one of the toughest fights in modern medicine. Oncolytics Biotech is advancing a therapy called Coverup, and we'll just call it Pella for short. Now, let me tell you guys, folks, this is not some run-of-the-mill drug. This is an intravenous immunotherapy designed to do something that cancer has always been good at avoiding. It trains the body's own immune system to recognize and destroy cancer cells. Now, think of it like what President Trump did to the political system, exposing corruption, forcing the swamp out into the open. Coverup is doing the exact same thing with cancer. It's pulling these tumors out of hiding and putting a big old red target on them so that the immune system can attack. So here's the genius behind this. Pella works in two ways. It directly kills cancer cells by replicating inside them and blowing them apart. It activates the immune system, turning what scientists called cold tumors, the ones ignored by your body, into hot tumors that the immune system can now attack. And unlike chemo that ravages healthy cells, Pella selectively goes after the cancer. That's precision. That's America First innovation here. So let's talk about the pancreatic cancer, okay? This is one of the deadliest forms of cancer with a survival rate that's been dismal for decades. But Pella has changed the game. In fact, the data shows that patients treated with Pella plus chemotherapy had a 2-year survival rate of 21.9% compared to just 9.2% with standard chemo alone. That's not incremental improvement. That's a revolution, folks. So here's where it gets even bigger. Oncolytics is working with the FDA right now to launch a registration-enabled pivotal trial in first-line pancreatic cancer before the end of the year. So this means they're not just running some small studies anymore. They're sprinting toward approval. And it's not just pancreatic. Pella is showing 2.5 times survival improvements in colorectal cancer patients with KRAS mutations, a group that typically has almost no good options. We're talking about extending lives in patients who desperately need hope. Plus, the Goblet trial is expanding Pella's reach across multiple GI cancers, even anal carcinoma, and the results are reinforcing the same story. Strong survival benefit, immune activation, and safety. Now, I know what you're thinking. New cancer drugs usually come with brutal side effects. But get this, Coverup has been given to over 1,200 patients, including 300 in GI cancers, and the safety profile has been consistent and favorable. Most side effects, mild flu-like symptoms. The serious ones, they come from chemo, not Pella. This is why the CEO, Jared Kelly, says Pella is one of the most de-risked immunotherapies not yet approved in GI cancers. Key opinion leaders, the doctors and scientists who actually run the behind-the-scenes studies, they're backing Pella. They've said it clearly. There is a massive unmet need, especially in pancreatic cancer, and Coverup may be the first immunotherapy that finally cracks the code. Now, folks, just like Trump built his movement by taking on impossible odds, this company is doing the same thing in oncology. So what's next? Well, Q4 2025, start up the pivotal pancreatic cancer trial. End of 2025, new data readout in anal carcinoma. Ongoing regulatory discussions with the FDA for both pancreatic and colorectal cancer. These milestones could be game changers for the company, its shareholders, and most importantly for patients. Here's the bottom line, guys. Oncolytics on the NASDAQ under ticker symbol ONCY is positioning Coverup as a platform therapy, one that works across multiple cancers, one that could combine with other treatments, and one that has the potential to save lives on a scale that we've never seen before. President Trump always says, America doesn't settle for losing. We fight, we win. And in the fight against cancer, Pella could be the breakthrough that turns the tide. Now, I want to be clear. I am not an investment advisor, and this is not investment advice. Investors should always do their own due diligence before making any investment decisions. But if you're paying attention to innovation, survival data, and companies that could make history, keep your eyes on Oncolytics, ticker symbol ONCY. So here's the shift, folks. Now that Trump is back in the White House, the truth is beginning to unravel on them. Really. I mean, the leaked memo proves the FBI wasn't an impartial observer. It was embedded in the crowd. Now, suddenly, the Democrats' favorite talking point is collapsing. And I'm going to say it again. If Trump hadn't returned in 2024, 2024 to become president of the United States again, or at least won the election in 2024. He was inaugurated in 2025. I know. Semantics, right? Do you really think that this would have ever seen the light of day? There's no chance. So ask yourself, how much of what we were told about January 6th was a calculated political weapon, not a search for the truth? And what else are they still hiding right now that hasn't been uncovered yet? And so then there, of course, is James Comey. Ah, yes, of course, the former FBI director who turned himself into a celebrity for hating Donald Trump. This week, he got hit with the shock of his life. A grand jury indictment. Oh yeah, he got hit with that. The two charges, well, actually there's a lot of charges, but the charges are 2 felonies. First, you got false statements to Congress. In plain English, it basically just means he was lying under oath. Second, obstruction of justice in a congressional proceeding. Each one of these carries a maximum of 5 years in prison. 10 years behind bars is now on the table for the man who once strutted around as if he was untouchable. Now, let's not forget who Comey is. He was the face of the deep state during Trump's first term, the man who weaponized the FBI, who played political games and, played around with the games with the investigators, and who openly fantasized about seeing Trump dragged away in handcuffs. His entire crusade against Trump didn't just waste years of this country's time. It cost millions of dollars, millions of taxpayer dollars, drained morale, and it shattered trust in our institutions. A lot of people don't even trust the institutions now. And so now the tables have turned. The man who once tried to jail Trump is the one staring at prison time himself. So tell me, guys, tell me that this isn't poetic justice, right? So here's the situation, all right? The very system that Comey twisted to try and destroy Trump has circled back on him. The hunter has now become the hunted. And the message is clear. No one, not even a former FBI director, is above the law. So here's where this trial becomes bigger than James Comey, guys. This isn't just about one man. It's about the question, how can you lie to Congress and get away with that? For decades, top officials in Washington have danced around questions on Capitol Hill. They use weasel words, they hedge, they dodge, they give these half-truths, then hide behind ongoing investigations. And every single time, guys, they walk out the door untouched. And a lot of people, I see them in the comments, they be like, Ron, they ain't never gonna do nothing to these people. Ron, they should have been done X, Y, Z. I know. I'm with you. Guys, I feel you, okay? Ordinary Americans would have been jailed in a heartbeat for lying under oath. But the elites, they shrug it off like it's just politics as usual. This case is different, though. Prosecutors believe Comey crossed a line that was so obvious, so undeniable that a grand jury agreed he had to face charges. And if he's convicted, he ain't gonna just be, it's not gonna just be Comey. It'll set a precedent. One, it's gonna say to every bureaucrat, every swamp creature, every unelected power broker in Washington that your days of lying to Congress without consequence are over. Drop a comment down below. Let me know who's the next political face that needs to be brought before justice for lying to Congress. Any names come to mind? Let me know, guys. But here's the danger. If Comey walks, if he skates by without any accountability, then what message does that send? That's probably even more powerful than him going to jail. I mean, that could send a message that the system protects its own, that even with Trump back in the Oval Office, even with the truth spilling out that the deep state is so deep that it has the power to shield its ally, that, my friends, would be a massive problem. So the stakes really couldn't be any higher. The trial is not just Comey on the line here. It's the very question of whether accountability exists in Washington at all at this point. So now, right on cue, James Comey took to the cameras, not in a courtroom, not under oath, but in a slick, self-produced video. He looked into the lens, tried to sound strong, and declared, "I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid." I was trying to do a James Comey. I failed. Anyway, he urged Democrats to vote like your country depends on it, he said, right? He framed himself as a hero standing up to a tyrant. He practically turned his indictment into a campaign ad. Brilliant. I give it to him. Brilliant way to try to spin it as usual. I'll give him that. But let's call it what it is. Posturing, a desperate attempt to rally his base. The same man who spent years weaponizing the FBI to crush Trump now wants to play the victim. He wants Democrats to believe that he's the last lawman standing between America and dictatorship. Now, here's the hypocrisy, though. This is the same James Comey who cheered on investigations, subpoenas, and legal harassment against Trump's family, Trump's allies, Trump's supporters, maybe even you. He had no problem when ordinary Americans were getting dragged dragged through endless hearings and bankrupting legal bills. But now that he's under the microscope, suddenly it's fear's the tool of the tyrant, according to him. Give me a break. I ain't buying this nonsense. So let's go ahead and ask the real question. Is this video just Comey's way of spinning his indictment into a political cause? Is he trying to rally Democrats to defend him, not because he's innocent, but because he just hates Trump? I mean, that's what it looks like. And I can tell you right now, Trump supporters ain't buying it. They see right through this act. So now I want to dig into something that the mainstream media barely wants to touch. This is the possibility that Comey's indictment is only the beginning. Veteran reporter Catherine Herridge, one of the most respected voices when it comes to covering the FBI and the DOJ, broke down what this really means. She called the indictment thin. Not weak, but thin. A holding charge. Why? Because the statute of limitations was about to run out on September 30th. Prosecutors had to act before the clock ran out. But here's the kicker. Herridge says this is likely just the opening move. By filing now, the door is open for superseding indictments, new expanded charges that could pile onto Comey once more evidence is unearthed during the discovery. So then comes the real bombshell, Operation Arctic Haze. This is the code name for a classified FBI leak investigation. Documentation show Comey himself directed senior FBI officials and even Columbia law professor Daniel Rickman to coordinate the media leaks. In other words, the FBI's top cop was greenlighting these leaks designed to damage Trump, all while pretending to be impartial. So here's the situation. If these thin charges are just the beginning, well, what else is waiting in the shadows? What if Arctic Haze leads straight to more FBI leaders, more media collusion, more corruption than we ever imagined? Now, of course, a lot of you guys were saying, I don't trust Christopher Wray with a 10-foot pole, and y'all called it long ago. If y'all called Christopher Wray out back then, just type in Christopher Wray fraud down below. But of course, the left, they're already screaming, this is Trump revenge. This is Trump using the DOJ to settle scores. I don't think that that's what this is, but that's the narrative that's being peddled right now. But let's slow down and look at the facts, okay? And they're not going to talk about this on the mainstream media, so grab a pen and paper and take this down, right? Take some notes down. Number one, this wasn't Donald Trump filing a lawsuit. This wasn't even Donald Trump's lawyers drafting an indictment. This was a grand jury of ordinary Americans who reviewed the evidence and said, yes, charges must be filed. Number two, Trump has been warning about this corruption for years. He didn't invent the FBI's leaks. He didn't force Christopher Wray to lie under oath. He didn't tell James Comey to play politics with investigations. He simply just refused to look the other way. And of course, number three, the system worked the way that it was supposed to. A grand jury, evidence, prosecutors, charges. This is accountability. It's not revenge. But here's where the situation really kind of like rises. It picks up because the same establishment that cheered when Trump's allies were raided at dawn, when his supporters were thrown in prison, when his family was subpoenaed over and over again, that same establishment now cries foul when the spotlight turns back on them. Isn't it funny when that happens? They call it revenge because they can't imagine accountability actually applying to their side. So ask yourself, is this the start of a new era where no one is above the law? Or maybe it's just the first battle in a much bigger war? Because one thing is certain, Trump is now in the spotlight. And now that he's in the spotlight as the president of the United States, he has lit the spotlight on all of those that have done some wrongdoing. And so now the deep state is nowhere to hide. Now, while all of this is unfolding, the FBI has exposed James Comey indicted, Trump's warnings actually proven true. What are the Democrats doing? Well, they're sending out Kamala Harris on a book tour. I know, guys, you heard me right, guys. While the deep state crumbles, Kamala Harris is out here trying to rewrite history, pretending that she was just 107 days away from beating Donald Trump. Think about that, guys. How absurd does that sound to you? Harris wants you to believe that if Biden had stepped aside a little bit earlier, she would have beaten the brakes off of Trump. But history tells a different story. She couldn't even survive her own party's primaries. She dropped out before the Iowa caucuses because voters saw through her empty word salads and these awkward speeches that no one even, for the most part, even showed up to. And so now Democrats are cringing as she drags their brand through the mud once again. Behind closed doors, like, these party insiders are rolling their eyes. They know Harris isn't rebuilding confidence. She's reminding America why she lost in the first place. Now, here's the situation, guys. The situation. As Trump's warnings are validated, Democrats are left clinging to Kamala Harris as their messenger. But if she couldn't inspire voters then why would she be able to inspire those voters now, right? That doesn't make any sense. She's even less relevant today than she was then. The contrast really couldn't be any sharper. Trump delivers accountability while Harris delivers all sorts of excuses and word salads, which kind of brings us to the final piece of the puzzle. Well, what happens next? Well, President Trump himself, he already said, there will be others. His words, not mine. And so that line should send shockwaves through the swamp. If James Comey is just the beginning, if this is just a test case, then who else could be next? Senior FBI officials who helped direct the leaks? DOJ lawyers who misled Congress? Intelligence officers who manipulated the media? I mean, the list is rather long, and for the first time in decades, accountability actually feels possible. But this is where the fight intensifies. The establishment is not just going to go down quietly. They will cry revenge. They will claim persecution. They will run to the cameras and insist that they're the victims. But the truth is this: they're terrified that their lies, their cover-ups, their years of unchecked power are finally catching up with them. So here's the final situation for you guys today. Like, if the FBI's role in January 6th has now been exposed, if James Comey is finally facing justice, then who's next? Are we ready as a country to confront just how deep this corruption goes? Ladies and gentlemen, Trump warned us about this. We didn't listen. But today, the evidence is undeniable. The FBI's secret army has been exposed, the cover-up is collapsing, and the first domino has fallen. So stay tuned, because this isn't the end of the story. In fact, this is only the beginning.